King of Drag's very first finale was nothing short of electric, and I am genuinely distressed that it is over. This top 3 of Molasses, Dick Van Dyke, and Henlo Bullfrog was everything that I wanted and more. And I was so happy that this was the top 3 and the artistry that we got to see in this finale. I loved the structure of it from start to finish. I know that anytime we open up with eliminated contestants, it's going to be a banger of an episode, and it was. The opening of this with the mini reunion showing the previous eliminated kings in Murray Hill Drag was so fun and such a good time. It was a nice way to really get a better picture of how their dynamics are when the cameras are off. We got to see a little bit of their BTS, of them in their hotels, traveling around the area with each other and hanging out. And something about that brings me a lot of joy that these kings were just allowed to roam freely around what I'm assuming is LA. That displays to me a little more care and kindness than other shows where they lock them down and don't let them interact with each other because drama might spill out while they're in their non-shoot time that they might want to capture for the camera and show to us as an audience. Having a genuine competition is really nice because we don't have to worry about all of that televised BS. What I enjoyed the most about this very charming Drag King season was how authentic it was in its presentation, from day one with those very silly boy band groups to this rockin' finale where everyone got a lot of time to present their artistry however their vision wanted to guide them, and a true celebration of their artistry. This show portrayed drag in a vulnerable and raw form that was still quite manicured and polished, but without the $10,000 price tag that the MTV show often puts on drag. And I don't mean the cash prize, I mean on the costuming. We got to see some excellent drag without it looking like they took out a second mortgage to be on the show. And I think I speak for a lot of folks when I say that we want to see drag that looks like it came from the everyday person. I think the extravagance of Drag Race is often cool. The extravagance of what Dragula has become is cool. But a lot of us just want to see what an artist can come up with that doesn't look like it could be hung up in an art gallery. I love that this entire experience felt like a genuine competition and not like it was television focused first. And for this finale, the Kings have 2 final challenges. One, if they're unlucky. They have 3 minutes to present whatever they want, however they want to do it. I'm so curious what every single one of the contestants was already planning on doing, because guaranteed they all were prepared at least for a finale. After the very first 3-minute challenge, one of the kings will be cut, which was a gag. I was not expecting that at all, but I don't mind that being the format. Seeing Dick Van Dyke crash out after not getting any sleep, completely restructuring their finale performance, and thinking about possibly leaving the competition because of all the doubt creeping in was not on my 2025 bingo card, but here we are. At the end of the day, I'm glad that he pushed through it and that he got himself to where he needed to be because his finale was really incredible. And I wonder what would have happened if he said, I'm gonna put myself first and I'm going to leave. Would they then have not eliminated Henlo even though that performance was not as strong? Would they have called in one of the kings who was already on deck, maybe Big D or maybe Perka, and said, hey, now's your chance. If you want to jump in, go ahead. Hurry. Let's talk about these finale performances. Henlo did the Ballad of Henlo Bullfrog. This was deeply personal Henlo lore inspired by his actual real life dad, who I was so glad to learn is deeply involved in this drag king's life. This performance was... I liked what it wanted to be, I'll say that. It was a story about this creature named Henlo who has to crawl out from the depths of hell and is really just this man that's underneath this creature and wants to get back to the life that they were living. I liked the idea of that. I liked the idea of the performance. There was so much story that was behind it. I think where it lacked was in choreography because it was just a lot of twirling and swirling and silk moving around without a lot of actual performance where it could have used a little more finesse. And the biggest glaring issue to me was the fact that the lips were not synced with the spoken word monologue. I could feel how passionate Henlo was about this number. I could feel that they knew all the beats and the hits and the emotions that were supposed to go into each word, but then when it came time to move the mouth in accordance with those passionate words, it just was a few seconds off or They forgot their place. And I can say as someone who has done spoken word numbers, they're very hard to learn, especially if you don't have a lot of time to prepare for it. And it does seem like everything was a little quick and rushed, as this season has been. There's a rhythm and a pace that comes with spoken word that you really have to sit down and time out every word and hit those beats mentally and physically so you know where those words are hitting, how they're supposed to hit, and the inflection you're supposed to move your mouth with in order to get those words out correctly, in a way that is more difficult than lip syncing to a traditional song. The problem with the Ballad of Henlo Bullfrog was that there was music in the background, and that can sometimes trip you up because your brain wants to lip sync to the words that are in the song. It might not be connecting with the spoken bits that are coming out. Henlo ultimately is cut right before the finale, and that bummed me out because I really wanted to see Henlo progress. I thought they were the most likely to win, but also it made sense to me. The lip sync was the technical weakest of the group. And I really hope that Henlo knows now, after having seen it, that none of this was personal at all. A lot of his confessionals were about how this performance was so deeply important to who he is as a person. And I think maybe in the moment, he was worried that his art was what was being evaluated, when really it was about the technical skill in presenting that art. Your art can be lovely, but if you have a paint stroke that is incorrect, technically your piece is not as strong as someone who didn't miss any of the correct strokes. And because this came down to those details, I hope that Henlo knows now, after watching the episode, that it had nothing to do with him per se. It had everything to do with the technical execution. Dick Van Dyke did a stand-up routine, which takes some huge balls to do, and it was a story about caring for elderly folks. I will admit, I was worried. Stand-up and drag can often not mesh with each other in the most harmonious way and can oftentimes be quite awkward to perceive. Thankfully, you can tell the DVD is on a mic very often because he banged this out. I was very proud of the execution. There were several jokes layered between every single sentence. There was never a moment where things got awkward or uncomfortable or we were sitting in silence for too long wondering where the story was going to go. We didn't have any word salads that are so typical of drag stand-up numbers. There was always something to smile at or laugh at or giggle at, and I appreciated that. I did start to raise an eyebrow at the cat dying story because as someone who lost my fur baby back in January, I started to get that emotional cringe moment of where is this going? And not being sure if the story would land because that was really where the punchline was at. But again, thanks to DVD being super skillful with their storytelling abilities, that final punchline landed and was hilarious. I think a part of comedy is finding humor in the discomfort. And I think Dick did that very well by finding this uncomfortable, memorable experience, finding the humor that was in that. It was really great, and I had absolutely no concern about him moving on to round 2. Molasses kept talking about in their confessionals how the lip sync might not have been enough. And so I was starting to get worried, what if they bomb it? What if this is the moment that Henlo scoots through, even if they were technically weaker, because maybe Molasses didn't do as good of a job. That's what I was worried was going to happen. And then Molasses is last, performing a number called Got Me Loose. I think it was choreographed really well. It had fluidity. It's what I expect from Molasses at this point. It was kind of haunting and emotional and impactful and powerful. I enjoy this thesis that we've been seeing more of this blending of masculine and feminine from Molasses, and I wish we got to see more of that through the entire competition. I think personally the ruffly overcoat was a little unnecessary because it didn't provide anything. It was just the standard drag thing where you come out in something huge and then take it off. I didn't think that was necessary. And I also don't know if the mic was completely necessary because it was essentially a small stripper pole. In drag, I was a diva who loved a prop, I loved a gimmick, and in my opinion, for performance, everything you bring to the stage should have an element of purpose and utility to your number. I'm pretty sure it was Morgan McMichaels one time told another drag competitor in a competition I was doing that if she had a mic on the stage that she had to keep it up to her face the whole time. Don't bring a mic out on stage if you're gonna hold it out here. Because the idea is that you're trying to sell to the audience that you're singing into that mic. So having this mic stand and then only interacting with it a few times to grab it and then sing into it, walk away from it, sort of felt like the illusion was shattered just a smidge. We obviously know that they're not really singing into that mic, but the purpose of that prop is to give us an extra layer to that performance. And it wasn't really utilized for that. So I think it wasn't a necessary prop. And so overall, I felt that some elements were discordant, and had Henlo really nailed that monologue, I think it's possible that Henlo could have moved forward over Molasses for that reason. Molasses and DVD then need to prepare a lip sync to the show's theme song, King. I wanna say I have no idea what the hell Lisa Rinna was doing there. She was just there to fill in a seat, I fear, but she looked really good. This finale performance did feel less ceremonial than the typical drag finale lip syncing number is, but I did get the sense that it was more of a courtesy than anything, rather than holding a ton of weight on who was going to win. What I liked about it is that both of them leaned in on their strengths. Molasses has been doing this thing the last several times they've performed where they're doing that interpretive dancing where they just move like water. And I think that worked very well for the 2 times that they were in the bottom. I think by now it's felt a little too familiar. And for me, personally, I really liked Dick's performance better. I liked that it was a bit more restrained and it followed one through line. I enjoyed that it was a little more concentrated on one thought, and that was being that himbo. Doing the hip thrusting, doing the gyrations, moving purposefully. And yes, it was very similar to last week's lip sync, but also Molasses was very similar to last week's lip sync as well. And I thought that playing the horn was a cute way of making the audience smile. Because at the end of the day, I think that drag should make you smile. And in my opinion, I think Molasses was maybe doing just a bit too much. There was interpretive dance, and there was push-ups, and there was pacing. And I think it was a little bit of the Drag Race effect where you throw everything at the wall, including the kitchen sink, and just hope that all of it sticks. There were a bunch of reveals that didn't really have anything to do with each other. There were a lot of color choices that didn't match, in my opinion. And to my critique earlier, I want everything to have purpose in a drag performance, and I felt that some of these elements didn't have the intentionality that I thought that Dick's overall performance in this finale did. Most of what I think Molasses did was sort of just gratuitous drag reveals than having any actual meaning or purpose. Taking the entire season into account, Molasses started out really strong, showing that they can go outside the box rather than just stay in it like so many of the other contestants. They had a pretty bad slip up in the later half where you should be standing out more because there are less people to compete with, and then swept the finale in a really strong way with strong performance choices. And Dick was great all season. Literally could have won the Dong Show. Could have been high in boy bands. And probably could have been high in the horror challenge. I think that Dick struggled a bit backstage for this finale, but the backstage stuff has never mattered throughout the overall competition experience. If someone is crashing out backstage, as long as they don't show it when they're performing, that's what matters, and we didn't see them crash out on the stage. And so I think there was good argument for either one of them to win. One last thing I enjoyed the most about this show is that it never felt primed on who was going to win the challenge and who was going to go home that week. And I was very open about that through each one of these recaps, is that I enjoyed that they would show someone's story throughout an episode, but that didn't necessarily mean that they were the winner that week. We just got to experience these kings for who they are. This week, however, in the edit, Molasses was the only one who got asked a question about their round 1 number, and that retained in the edit with their emotional storytelling of what it all meant to them. And that conversation making the edit automatically primed me that Molasses was going to win. And so in that moment, I did feel a little bit bummed because I kind of liked that we were misdirected all season. It was a very different editing choice for this finale. And I want to say, I'm not upset that Molasses won at all. I'm upset that Dick didn't win. I think I would have been upset that anybody didn't win. The last thing I want to say before we wrap this up is just a competition complaint, and that is the lack of Sasha Velour there. Tenderoni is a great main panelist, and I love his presence in the room, but he is the only one who is consistently there every single episode, week to week. Having Sasha Velour there for these last 2 episodes would have been very beneficial to the overall integrity of the competition, since she would have seen everything that happened in the first 4 weeks and would have been able to have a more critical eye on what was familiar in this finale that these kings have already done in the previous weeks. Her critiques would have helped, I think, guide them and have a more fine-tuned eye than someone like Mick, who has only 1 extra week to be able to critique these kings and has not seen the full breadth of what they did, or can do. Other judges not having seen the entire breadth of the competition troubles my soul just a little bit, because there was only 1 judge who got to see everything. And to bring it to Drag Race, as many people's automatic recall is, that would be like if they just had Michelle at the finale and told Rue and Carson and Ross and TS and Law to go and kick rocks, and then they had Merle and Santino show up. Yeah, fresh eyes are always great for critiques and helping guide who should win, because they're not influenced, I guess, by the overall competition, but having consistency is very important to me in having a winner choice. That's just a small technical nitpick, and I hope that whatever happens in season 2, that they're able to lock in their judges for the entire time. I think it would be great to have Tenderoni, Landon, and Sasha there as permanents, and then whoever the other 2 can just rotate out all the time. I enjoyed this show immensely. I love that it was a celebration of drag, of history, of kings who have not had their place on television in a very long time. I would have loved at least 2 more episodes with these boys, and I hope that season 2 is just a smidge longer and that they have an even bigger budget. And I think this finale was a great way to showcase their talents and package those talents to us as an audience. I cannot stress enough how special it was to watch this from week to week, and I appreciate so many of you coming back and sharing your thoughts and who you're rooting for, and I can't wait for hopefully a season 2 to talk about that. If you're interested in Drag Race stuff, I know that Slajon Royale is going to be happening very soon, which I will be covering, so keep an eye out for that if you're interested. Who were you rooting for and who impressed you the most this entire competition? Thank you for watching, and I will see y'all on the flip.